Welcome back to the weekly podcast. I'm your dope man over here. But the dope I'm bringing you is just a bunch of news about the drug war. Nothing to get excited about. I had some highlights. What happened? So, we're going to start off with Duterte. It's been a while since I mentioned this guy. And yeah, the sick fucker is at it again with his rhetoric. No surprise. So Duterte makes lewd threats to female rebels in the Philippines. Yeah, basically he told soldiers last week to shoot female rebels in their genitals. The latest of several violent misogynistic remarks. Addressing a group of former communist rebels on Wednesday, Duterte, who served as a mayor before becoming president, appeared to encourage the armed forces of the Philippines to target women in conflict. Quote, tell the soldiers, quote, there's a new order coming from the mayor. We won't kill you. We'll just shoot your vagina, he said. If there is no vagina, it would be useless. Duterte continued, according to local media reports, appearing to imply that women are useless without their genitals. The president's communications office included the comment in the official transcript from the event, but replaced the word vagina with a dash. Yeah, this is just par for the course as far as his rhetoric goes, but I mean, this is just like one step farther. He's actually like telling people to do this shit. He is pushing the fascist AFP to commit more bloody human rights violation and grave abuses of international humanitarian law, and takes state terrorism against women and the people to a whole new level. And that was a feminist organization spokesperson, Emmy de Jesus, a representative for Gabriela. In a statement, Carlos Conde, a researcher for the Human Rights Watch, called Duterte's remarks, quote, the latest in a series of misogynist, derogatory, and demeaning statements he has made about women. It encourages state forces to commit sexual violence during armed conflict, which is a violation of international humanitarian law. And, you know, yeah, Duterte, I don't know what else to say about the guy. He's got a lot of support, apparently, but I fucking think he's got to go. I don't care how much his people like him. Fuck him. What he's doing is fucking gross. It's not accomplishing anything. So how far are we into this crazy drug war he has going on? And did it really even, did anybody, what's going on with that? You would think that there'd be like this big, like the sun comes up and flowers start blossoming, and nobody's doing meth anymore, because I think that was what the country had such this big drug epidemic that he was bitching about when he was running for president. We're talking about meth. Did they stop doing meth in the Philippines? No, probably not. Especially since his fucking one of his sons was a mayor of Davao, or not the actual mayor, but like an assistant or some shit. Got caught. Turns out he was one of the biggest meth dealers in the Philippines. So I don't know. It's a bunch of bullshit. International Criminal Court to probe Duterte drug war deaths in the Philippines. The International Criminal Court announced Thursday it is opening a probe into the deaths linked to President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs, a move that eventually could lead to charges of crimes against humanity. That would be fucking nice. Prosecutor Fatou Banzueda said she is opening a preliminary examination into the high number of killings since Duterte took office in the summer of 2016. Her statement confirmed an earlier announcement from Duterte's spokesman, Harry Roque, who broke the news ahead of the court. In a news conference earlier Thursday, Roque said the Philippines had been informed of the examination. He claimed that Duterte, who was regularly condemned and dismissed the court, he had regularly condemned and dismissed the court, welcomed the news. Quote, "He's sick and tired of being accused," Roque said. "He wants to be in court and put the prosecutor on the stand." Isn't that nice? And I'm guessing because the prosecutor is a woman, he thinks he can talk about how she's worthless without her vagina or something, and that's going to win points and win him favor over the jury. I don't know what his fucking strategy is. Human rights and legal experts were glad to see the court take action. Agnes Callamard, the UN Special Rapporteur for extrajudicial killings, welcomed the move, saying that the Philippines is not living up to its international obligation to investigate the killings. And she says she had warned repeatedly a major human rights crisis has been unfolding in the Philippines, characterized amongst, by other things, vast number of allegations of extrajudicial executions and a failure on the part of the state to undertake prompt, independent, impartial investigations. So, let's see, right down here. So far, Duterte's strong political support, combined with his reputation for silencing critics, has kept the Philippine institutions from conducting independent investigations or pursuing criminal charges. In fact, there has yet to be a single successful prosecution of officers accused of drug war abuses, despite compelling evidence of systematic killings, staged crime scenes, and extortion. Duterte has repeatedly vowed to pardon police officers. Roque's assertion that the Philippine government has been willing and able to investigate those deaths has simply not been true. Parampreet Singh, Associate Director of Human Rights Watch International Justice Program, wrote in a statement, quote, "The government's claims of its preparedness to prosecute offenders is grotesquely deceptive," Singh said. And I remember reading a report about that, it was kind of a while ago, but not too long ago. And one of the things was that they didn't, they had like this investigation unit that investigates corruption and police misconduct and shit like that. And it was like a bureaucracy, and it had a lot of employees, like over 100, and it had some good funding. And then all of a sudden, when Duterte came to town, he cut their budget like 100%. He fired everybody and fucking sent them packing. So there's, that's probably what they're talking about here. Experts stress that the paramilitary, or that a preliminary examination is not a case or even a charge, and that the court's work takes years, not weeks or months. Of course. Whatever the outcome, the fact that the ICC is opening an examination is likely to have an impact on Duterte and the Philippines. The tagline, "Being investigated by the ICC," could make it more difficult for foreign governments, including the United States, to work with Duterte, said Richard Haved Haidarian, a security analyst and author of The Rise of Duterte. I don't know, man. I think Trump is in love with Duterte, so I don't think Duterte could do anything or any investigation. Like, he's pretty much, that's pretty much like what Trump would do, I mean, think about it. Trump would be like, oh, I can't wait to get to court so I can talk about the, all the things about this prosecutor that's not good. Because that's what he does. That's what Duterte does. It's a playbook out of the insane, quite frankly, but apparently these days it fucking works, so we'll see what happens. Quote, "This will clearly solicit widespread international attention and thus re-energize those that seek justice and accountability." We hope it does, man. That's all we can do is hope. So in other news, tomorrow, or now, I mean, by the time anybody sees this clip, it'll be later on today, the lawsuit against Jeff Sessions will be heard in court. All right, if you know, I mean, I've been covering this story since it broke, and every time there's been an update, and I've been waiting on the edge of my seat for the big old court date, so here it is. And in case you haven't been in the loop, a lawsuit against Jeff Sessions has been in the works for months now, specifically a lawsuit alleging that the federal prohibition of cannabis is unconstitutional, and tomorrow that lawsuit will be read and evaluated in the federal court of New York City. United States Attorney General Jeff Sessions is infamous in his vehement stance against cannabis. Since his appointment as Attorney General, he has not held back on sharing his views on the matter. These views have been entirely in favor of prohibition and firmly against marijuana legalization of any kind, including medical marijuana. Sessions' statements about cannabis have historically not been rooted in any sort of scientific evidence. Rather, they have been a regurgitation of antiquated theories and Harry Anslinger-esque rhetoric. Sessions has to date refused to entertain any evidence or research that contradicts his anti-cannabis stance. Indeed, a previous Attorney General, Eric Holder, asserted that Sessions has an almost obsession with marijuana, specifically with marijuana prohibition. And, Holder was probably like nudging him like, dude, just slow, incremental, and, basically just don't talk about it and nobody will bring it up. Because that's kind of what he did, and whatever the protections that were drawn up, the Cole memo and whatnot, obviously Holder could have just struck that shit down if he wanted to, but he didn't, and we seen what happens when Sessions did. Now everybody's talking about it. Now you got all these people pushing Sessions even harder than before, and now he's got to deal with this shit. So on January 4th, 2018, Attorney General Sessions put definitive action behind his words. He rescinded the Cole memo, piece of Obama-era legislation that was put in place to prevent the federal government from interfering with states with legalized and regulated marijuana. While lawmakers around the country have been stepping up to the plate to go head-to-head with this blatant violation of states' rights, a separate lawsuit against Sessions has been in the progress since autumn of last year. And the complaint isn't coming from lawmakers. It is coming from civilians who depend on medical marijuana. The plaintiffs. The most prominent plaintiff in this lawsuit, Jeff Sessions, is Alexis Bortel, a 12-year-old girl. She uses medical cannabis to control and quell her debilitating epilepsy. In order to secure this life-saving treatment, she and her parents were forced to relocate from their native Texas to Colorado. The medical marijuana that Bortel uses every day is perfectly legal in Colorado, but because of federal prohibition, she can't travel with her medicine. This means that she cannot leave the state. So what's a young person to do when she's essentially trapped because of federal marijuana prohibition? Sue the federal government, specifically Jeff Sessions. Attorney Mike Hiller has taken on the task of representing Bortel and 4 other plaintiffs. Bortel's co-plaintiffs include her father, Dean Bortel, another child and his parent, Jaeger and Sebastian Cotter, an Army veteran, Jose Bellin, and a retired football player, Marvin Washington, and a non-profit organization, Cannabis Culture Association, Inc. The lawsuit against Jeff Sessions alleges that the Controlled Substance Act violates the constitutional rights of medical marijuana patients. From the complaint shared with us by Hiller, PC Attorney at Law, plaintiffs seek a declaration that the CSA, as it pertains to the classification of cannabis as a Schedule I drug, is unconstitutional because it violates the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, an assortment of protections guaranteed by the First, Ninth, and 10th Amendments, plus the fundamental right to travel, the right to equal protection, and the right to substantive due process. In plain language, the federal prohibition of cannabis is unconstitutional, and these lawyers are here to prove it. So today, this court document attached to the lawsuit against Jeff Sessions will be read and evaluated. That would be February 14th, 2018, in the Federal Court of New York City. The case will be presided over by Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein. This will be an open hearing, so I'm sure we'll see some video. Alexis Bortel will not be in attendance because, again, she is unable to travel without her medication, and more to the point, she is unable to travel with her medication. If the plaintiffs are successful, it will not just be a victory for them, it will be a victory for the thousands of medical marijuana patients in this country. I mean, if you can prove, if a judge, puts the gavel down on, okay, yeah, this isn't constitutional, I don't know what happens next. The constitutionality just got, shot down for cannabis being a Schedule 1 in the Controlled Substances Act. What will happen next? I really don't know, man. I'm not an expert in this in federal drug policy per se, and I've read people that are, and when I see what they say, I don't know if I really agree with it. But if they do get their declaration from the judge or the court saying that CSA classification is unconstitutional, that's going to get crossed off right away. And then I don't know if the FDA and the DEA are going to scramble around and try to figure out what to do next. I'm not sure. But basically, this is pretty far-reaching, all right? And it's going to be pretty good, because there's no way the judge is going to hear this and be like, oh, nah, it's totally cool to be on Schedule 1. There's no problem with that. The problem is common sense says there's no way it should be in Schedule 1. And any judge that would go past that and has to rule on other things is just being ridiculous. Trump's budget. Let's talk about this budget. Whenever we talk about the government working and what they're doing, you can't really call this a Trump budget. I mean, of course Trump's going to stamp it, but this is all the people that want their money wanting more money always, all right? And what we got to do is we got to cut it. We got to cut that off, man. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable what's going on here with this attempt at basically bringing the drug war right straight back to fucking 1984. And I'm not talking about the Orwell book either. I'm talking about the year 84. When Jeff Sessions was a junior fucking prosecutor, barely, because, he almost didn't get appointed because even the Republicans that had to make the decision, the Senate and whatnot, even they were like, I don't know, this guy's a little too racist. That was when he was trying to be a judge back then. Didn't happen. So anyway, this shit here is just it's like someone just stepped into a time machine and took me back to 1984 with the drug war. I'll tell you all about it right here. So the budget was released, the details, and an alarming drug policy reform advocates by the increase of funding for programs most associated with the war on drugs. Just 2 years ago, President Obama's budget focused more money on treatment and prevention than enforcement and interdiction. Trump's budget appears to be a reversal of that approach. And I've said this before, when Republicans take the reins of government over, wherever that happens, they reverse that. They always do that. To Republicans, you got the 3 ways to win the drug war is to, 1, you don't try to win it. 2, you just keep on playing both sides of it. And 3, you make money from all the people that are trying to do whatever they're trying to do in it. That's it. It's a simple strategy. And the best way to do that is to not spend any money on rehab. In fact, discourage rehab. Make it mandatory in certain situations, like kids that get caught smoking weed at middle school or something. But other than that, rehab, no. We got jail. We got ramping up enforcement. In fact, usually they try to make new laws or make stricter rules for sentencing guidelines and shit. But in today's political climate, I don't know if they are going to attempt that. But, that's what they usually do. And then the third plank that they always go with is the reefer madness. They always want to like put a lot of money on messaging. They're like, oh, we can, Nancy Reagan with the just say no and the dare and all that shit. Like, what did I say? The 80s? Yeah, we're bringing dare back. Check it out. Just pay attention. Watch this. So Trump's budget proposes new funds for addressing the opioid overdose crisis, but far more money is being sought by the president to escalate the war on drugs, said Grant Smith, interim director of the Drug Policy Alliance Office of National Affairs. Quote, we know from decades of locking people up for drugs that it doesn't work to curb drug use, but Trump's budget proposes wasting billions of dollars to do exactly that. The money would be better spent on harm reduction and treatment interventions that actually prevent overdoses and save lives. They don't give a flying fuck about this situation with the opioids. And now you got patients and doctors out there that are becoming the target of this new drug war. Doctors are already fucking paranoid, but now they're just straight out scared. A doctor in this climate is just as scared to prescribe someone opioids legally as somebody selling a bag of crack was back in the 80s. That's the hysteria that is already there. And now they're going to basically ramp that up even more. They're actually going to be combing through databases, finding doctors that they feel like have prescribed too many pills, and they're going to make cases on them. Believe it. You're going to start seeing it. So here's what the most concerning parts of this budget is. We got an increase of $400 million from fiscal year 17, level enacted by Congress for the Drug Enforcement Administration. In my opinion, that's a little bit lower than what they usually get, so I'm kind of wondering about that. And, of course, the Drug Policy Alliance is going to add this little caveat at the end, a scandal-ridden agency, with a link, because the DEA has a lot of controversies. All right, let's get through this list real quick, and I'll throw you over a few of those. $18 billion over 2 years in funding to build a wall at the border with Mexico. We've heard all about this Trump wall. That seems to be like one of the things that always makes the Trump base, or whatever you want to call it, the people out there that'll always love Trump no matter what. This is the one thing that they might not love. If you don't build the wall, eventually they're going to start getting pissed, because they think that this wall represents, like, this is going to fix everything, all of America's ills. It's going to fix the opioid epidemic. It's going to fix the immigration problem, because they believe the scapegoating about how immigration, whether it's illegal or whatever, as long as it's coming from south of the border, it's taking some American jobs, which is total horseshit. Meanwhile, fruit is rotting in the fields because migrant workers are afraid to come across the border. After seeing all the ICE raids and shit lately, I'd be kind of fucking afraid too. Anyhow, yeah, we know that this bullshit wall is totally garbage. And it wouldn't stop the flow of drugs or money or immigrants any more than if you didn't have a fucking wall. A lot of people come across the border on an airplane or on, legally, and then they just stay here. A lot of people are migrant workers. They can come and go as they please, or maybe they can't. They should be able to, though. So we got an increase of $5 million for Interagency Crime and Drug Enforcement, an entity that coordinates federal agency to arrest and prosecute drug sellers. And I would think that, once again, this is a low number, but it's an increase. So what they're not telling you is they already give these people a big fat fucking lump sum. And I'm not sure what this Interagency Crime and Drug Enforcement budget currently was, but I know the DEA's current budget was somewhere around $27 billion. So when you see increases that don't have a B after it, you're like, that's not that big of a deal, because you've been conditioned to think it. But $400 million extra dollars in the DEA's coffers is a big deal. It doesn't make fucking sense at all. And I mean, I've seen them trying to justify budgets before when getting audited, and it wasn't pretty. It didn't make any sense. They were basically using ditchweed as an excuse as to why they need billions upon billions of dollars, and I don't get that. I still don't understand how they got away with that. But whatever, they get rewarded with increases in their budget every year, even though the heroin problem is way worse than it was 45, we'll just say 45 years ago when the DEA got formed by the Nixon drug war or whatever. Since then, what has happened? Heroin, off the charts. Potency, more potent than ever. Price, cheaper than ever. Availability, it's in more places than ever before. It's everywhere. And it's basically available just as easily to get as probably any other commodity. It depends on where you live. It's probably more available than most commodities. If you live in the inner city, for sure, it's more available than a good grocery store. So whatever. Interagency. This is the one that I told you earlier. $50 million in funding for anti-drug media campaign. That's a lot of money. I wonder what the last time that they had like a DARE budget was. I guarantee you it wasn't no $50 million. And if it was, boy, did they get ripped off. And what has that shit ever done for anybody? It's just like some cult classic fucking commercials that everybody remembers, you know. Crack an egg. Hey, there's your brain on drugs. I mean, this shit is just ridiculous, man. Are you kidding me? And again, you're conditioned to be like, oh, 50 million, that ain't shit. Dude, I guarantee you this is a room no bigger than this fucking bedroom right here with like 3 people in it, splitting $50 million trying to figure out how to like make some marketing shit. You know, DARE, just say no. What are they going to say now? I mean, lately the rhetoric that Sessions has been going with is take a couple aspirins and tough it out. Or, you know, take a couple bufferins and go to bed. You know, he's reworded it and he's trying to chisel it into a good talking point, but it's, please don't make that the fucking slogan of this campaign. I do not want to see anything that has to do with, you know, you can tough it out. Because, all right, granted, there probably wasn't a huge big deal with the opioid epidemic is the fact that doctors were basically Pez dispenser in this shit. All right, like a lot of people didn't really need opioid prescriptions. I might be able to agree with you, and we can make a case for that. But there is a fucking lot of situations where people are in need of the opioids, you know, and quite frankly, when somebody that suffers debilitating pain sees that kind of shit, and then at the same time you're trying to fucking make kratom a Schedule 1 drug, and you don't want medical marijuana to be in anybody's hands. We know what the fuck you're doing, man. You're trying to pipeline everybody and steer them right into your dangerous, deadly, addictive, fucking nightmare-ass opioids. So, I don't know. I mean, your Just Say No campaign in the modern era is just going to get fucking laughed at. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Which, okay, let's see. Congress eliminated this shit in 2012 after studies showed that the hysterical nature of such campaigns may have led to an actual increase in drug use. Especially, and here's what they mean by hysterical. They're not talking about, you know, the fucking ridiculous nature of the actual advertising material, which in itself is a joke. How many times have you been to some party and seen a Just Dare shirt or a Just Say No? Just Say No, not so common anymore. Matter of fact, that kind of was like a fly-by-night intro to this kind of federal spending on wasting, just total waste of money. All right? And you're talking about Republicans talking about being the fiscal, I don't know why anybody ever says this ever. Oh, the Republicans, now I vote for them because they're the fiscally smart people. You know, they don't just waste all your money. It's like, how the fuck has this country been brainwashed into thinking that? I mean, right now you got nothing but Republicans running the government, and they just slapped an extra $1 trillion on the deficit, which is already a fucking $500 billion. I mean, if Obama even attempted to do something like that, Mitch McConnell would have fucking just crawled back into his turtle shell and just took a big shit right on the floor. Come on. Are you serious? $50 million for fucking bringing back the DARE program? I can't even believe this shit. Who approved this? Democrats had to vote for this. So Democrats, I don't know if they had a chance to read it. Usually the new trend in government is we don't compromise, we don't debate, we just, we throw the rhetoric out there and then we put the thing down. You know what's in it. But Democrats definitely should have looked into this. Someone should have figured this out and been like, no, we don't need a DARE program. It's stupid. What else we got? 43 million for drug courts. All the things that don't work. All the things that fail. So drug courts, despite mounting evidence that drug courts reject evidence-based approaches to treating drug use, often banning methadone and buprenorphine, to treat drug use as a criminal issue, not a public health issue. I mean, and they treat the people that are in there like they fucking murdered or raped little babies. It's terrible how drug courts treat people. It's just awful. Anybody got any good experiences dealing with a drug court? Put it in the comment section below. I highly doubt we're going to see any of that shit. And while they're at it, they're going to go ahead and cut $20 million from the Second Chance Act, a program that helped incarcerated individuals to re-enter society upon release. Yeah, so that's pretty disturbing, but this is sickening too. We all know about the high intensity drug trafficking area. So it is deeply concerning to see that the high-intensity drug trafficking area program is being moved to the Drug Enforcement Administration. This Reagan-era program incentivizes state and local enforcement to make drug arrests and then send the bill to the federal government, increasing incarceration and allowing states to shrink fiscal responsibility for their actions. I think I need to translate that into more simple-to-understand terms. We're talking about small time, waste of time, possession or minor drug dealing, like maybe someone had 3 or 4 dime bags or some shit. This thing here, this high intensity drug trafficking area, allowed the local people to, instead of just be like, well, you know what, we'll let you go this time. No, they never do that. Not when they know that they can get all their money reimbursed by the HIDTA. It should be eliminated, not moved, or at a minimum reformed to ensure the program focuses on high-level traffickers. Just get rid of it. This is just ridiculous, man. This is just a checks and balance system so that their corrupt-ass shit goes off without a hitch. That's all it is. While there are net increases in funding to tackle the opioid epidemic, too much of the funding goes towards law enforcement agencies. The section of the budget on federal drug control funding shows that while there is around $900 million in increased funding for the Department of Health and Human Services, there is a parallel increase of $775 million for the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to carry out drug enforcement activities. The administration's claim that it is requesting $13 billion to combat the opioid epidemic is overshadowed by a request of $18 billion to build a wall. Ultimately, the fate of the budget proposal is in the hands of Congress. In recent years, there has been a bipartisan attempt to move us away from the war on drugs. Republicans and Democrats continue to work together on marijuana legalization, sentencing reform, and treating the opioid overdose crisis as a public health issue, not an enforcement one. And if you're one of those Trump worshippers like I was talking about earlier, I know you guys are always talking about this fucking game of 3D chess that Trump is playing. When's he going to be like, checkmate? I don't understand how that happens. Does it happen because everybody that, you know, we go 10 more years with this opioid epidemic and more people die every year before they finally realize, like, 3D chess, right-wing policies are garbage and they don't fucking work, so we can't do those anymore. No, that's not how it works, because we've been doing right-wing policies on this drug war for 45 fucking years. It ain't working, and they're laughing because they're just sitting there counting money. That's all they do. They don't care about the lives they ruin, and they don't care about lives that are being ruined. So the drug war rages on, man. Trump budget shouldn't have surprised anybody that it was total garbage. For anybody that thought that the Trump administration was going to be better for the drug epidemic, I mean, I'm saying better than before. Like, he's talking about draining the swamp and making America great again and all this shit. Fuck no. This is going backwards to the fucking 80s during a real shitty time when cops were kicking doors in all the time. You know, we don't want to go back to that. So, the DEA claimed prohibition was a success. Oh boy. Yeah, that's how they got their job. The DEA imprisoned an innocent suspect in a holding cell for 5 days without food and water. That's terrible. DEA agent shot himself in a classroom full of children. DEA agents have lost their guns in weird places, including an airport bathroom. Agent left important case documents lying around a suspect's house. Agent impersonated a woman by creating a fake Facebook profile in her name. These don't seem like that big of a deal. Like, I've heard where the Colombian drug lords were having parties and, you know, buying hookers for the DEA, and they were doing cocaine and doing the hookers and all. You know, that's the kind of shit that gets me. Like, hey, you guys are acting like you're the enforcers of rules, and now you're out there fucking breaking every rule in the book. Corrupt DEA agents made millions off of the drugs they were supposed to be taken off the street. We figured that. You know, we've been figuring that one out for a long time. DEA has terrorized and killed innocent people like all cops. The agency has even killed people on foreign soil. Well, that shouldn't be a surprise. The DEA raided a woman's house because she'd shopped at a garden store. The DEA once tried to ban pacifiers and glow sticks, claiming they were drug paraphernalia. I guess they were just against people having goofy-ass fun. The agency is so willing to reconsider some of its outdated policy that the DEA chief... so unwilling that the chief once refused to acknowledge that marijuana is less harmful than crack and heroin. Well, you know, those are all fine and dandy, but I think those are not quite as sketchy as some of the things I've heard. Just saying. But that was Nick Wing. He's the guy that's been following this Kratom thing for me. Like, I've been paying attention to him. Another person I've been paying attention to since about the 90s is this guy here, Bernie fucking Sanders. And since 2015, he's been one of the leaders in the Senate and in the federal government in general, as far as to get the federal government out of the fucking prohibition of marijuana game. All right. And say what you will, but and I'm not talking about Gatewood Galbraith or even Jimmy Carter when he ran, but as far as presidential candidates ever, period, that made it as far as he did, which is, you know, to the last few votes were counted in the primaries, and I believe, you know, he had a pretty good shot. This guy came in, nobody knew who the fuck he was when he started running for president. And then, boom, he almost beat Hillary Clinton in the primary. And I would argue that he probably should have beat Hillary, but that's a whole different channel for that kind of discussion. But anyway, what's he doing lately? Well, he launched a marijuana petition, and I know petition, ooh, big deal. I'm going to try to put this link to the petition in the description if you are interested, if that's what I'm not sure if that's what this is. But anyway, he is asking his supporters to pressure Congress to legalize marijuana and end the broader war on drugs. Now, I think that's the only reason I really pulled this story is because that's a pretty brave fucking thing to say. And the only way that you can say that in this political environment as corrupt as it is, and everybody is beholden to donors. That thing right there in front of his state, that I right there, that's the only way you can do it. Because both of the other parties are so fucking corrupted right now that nobody in either party is able to step up to the plate and say anything about ending the war on drugs. Because it's a multifaceted issue, and just blatantly, take a blunt object and knock the drug war right out off of its heels. There's a lot of bureaucracies that would feel that shockwave. And that's unfortunate that we're entrenched in this drug war because so many people rely on it for their livelihood. It's fucking ridiculous. And that's on both sides of it, too. I mean, there's people that sell drugs that if the fucking government decided to tax and regulate all drugs tomorrow, they'd be out of a job. So you'd have to figure out, what are we going to do about all the people that are currently in that? And they don't even care about the people that are currently in the marijuana. As soon as they legalize it, if you get, oh, you used to grow weed when it was illegal, we're not going to let you in the business. We don't like you. Anyway, in an email sent to the former and possibly future presidential candidates' campaign email list on Wednesday night, the senator wrote that the federal government's anti-cannabis approach is an issue of grave consequence. Citing racial disparities in enforcement, Sanders said that the marijuana prohibition is part of a larger failed war on drugs that has led to a great national crisis of mass incarceration. And that's why I've been paying attention to this guy since the 90s, is because he's been saying this same shit about the drug war since the fucking 90s. That's what got my attention. He's asking supporters to sign an online petition calling on federal lawmakers to treat drugs as a health issue instead of a crime and, quote, invest in programs that focus on treatment and prevention. Again, same shit he's been saying since the 90s, man. You can look up old videos of him talking on talk shows, on like Sunday shows, or even talking on the floor, on the House floor. You can find videos of him mentioning these same talking points. Calling the rescheduling of cannabis a, quote, first step, he said the marijuana's current classification is more restrictive category than cocaine doesn't make any sense. I'm kind of at odds with him saying anything about rescheduling and going. That's kind of, for him, that would be taking a step backwards. Quote, let's have states decide the issue of marijuana for themselves like they do with alcohol, he wrote. More and more states are moving in the direction of decriminalization. Let them make those decisions without federal interference. In late 2015, amidst his bid for the Democratic presidential nomination, Sanders filed the first ever marijuana descheduling bill to be introduced in the U.S. Senate. So if he's going from descheduling to rescheduling, he's taken a little bit of a step to the right. But I don't know if this was his classification, or, if that's what his actual online petition. Let's pull that up anyway. Yeah. I don't see where this says anything about it getting rescheduled. I don't want to dox myself. Alright, anyway, back to the story. So, in late, the legislation ended up going nowhere. Of course, there were 0 co-sponsors. And basically, it was just a non-issue with all the other shit that was going on. And, presidential politics basically takes over the whole, like, all the ether. There's just, like, no other room to talk about real issues except for the issues that they're talking about, when running for president. And the marijuana issue does come up, but it's always really structured the way they bring that into the debate. All right, so Sanders hasn't introduced any new marijuana bills during the current 115th Congress, which began more than a year ago, but he has signed on as a co-sponsor of the cannabis banking legislation filed by Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon. And I'm kind of mad that he hasn't yet co-sponsored the Cory Booker's bill filed that would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substance Act, similar to Sanders' 114th Congress proposal. The Booker legislation goes even further by withholding funding from states with racially discriminatory cannabis enforcement. I don't understand why Bernie hasn't signed on to that yet, the Cannabis Justice Act. And it's almost to the point where I want to write a letter to him and see if I can get a response from somebody in his office about that. Like, what, you know, and if Bernie was going to run for president in 2020, and this is the kind of backpedaling that they got him doing to be in the Democratic Party and run as a Democrat, I'm not about that at all, man. I mean, you know, you can't go from deschedule to reschedule. You just can't fucking do it. You either got to be at reschedule the whole time and make your case there, and then eventually you're going to get worn down and you're going to go to deschedule as well. But if you do go to, I mean, we can make a good argument for rescheduling. We sure could. It comes with stipulations that you can't interfere with current systems that are already set up. And you can't like impose some kind of a federal standards on the rules because, you know, why would you? But whatever. Maybe we can find out more about that later. So in addition to Sanders, other potential 2020 Democratic presidential candidates, Senators Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, are signed on to the banking bill. Warren and potential presidential contender Kirsten Gillibrand are also co-sponsors of a separate comprehensive medical marijuana bill that Booker himself, a rumored 2020 candidate, introduced. So like I was saying before in some other video, or maybe a couple of them, is as the 2020 presidential race starts heating up, it seems like this far out is when people can get their marijuana policies, you know, basically set in stone. So the reason that they do it this far out is so that it doesn't look like that's what they're running on, you know, and that they don't get pigeonholed by anybody that's running against them. Because people know, especially people on the left, know that it's going to be a hot topic issue in 2020. It already is now, but I mean, it's going to be a big issue in 2020, and you need to get your foot in the door now. But furthermore, they're not, I don't know why they worry about getting pigeonholed, to be honest. Anyway, I'm not going to read his letter, but I will go ahead and put a link to this article and to the actual petition in the description below, so that in case you all wanted to go fill that out. In fact, excuse me while I do that. Another story I touched on a little bit. I don't know if it was when I did the month clip for January. I think that's when it was, but basically that's when this whole siege of the Justice Department began. To me, this is one of the classic battles in Washington, and it's funny because it's like a Republican versus a Republican. Usually this is just Mitch McConnell versus the Democrats, or Ted Cruz versus the Democrats. It's always a Republican against a Democrat. And the Republicans are always holding something over the heads, like holding something hostage, unless they get their way. And it's always a Republican doing it. And now we got a Republican doing it to a Republican, so it's kind of awesome. So it's been a month since the pot blockade began, and U.S. Senator Cory Gardner is standing firm in his vow to jam all appointments to the Department of Justice until Attorney General Jeff Sessions softens his stance on marijuana. So far, his siege to protect both Colorado's cannabis industry and the state's sovereignty has prevented as many as 11 nominees from getting a Senate floor vote, the last major step before they can start work. And there's a little indication that Gardner, Republican from Colorado, and Sessions are any closer to finding common ground. Quote, "It may never resolve itself," said U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, who chairs the committee in charge of getting these nominees to the floor. If that happens, the consequences would extend far beyond the 11 nominees that Garner has put on ice. More than 20 other candidates are in the congressional pipeline for justice-related jobs, including U.S. Marshals and U.S. Attorneys assigned to states across the country. One even hails from Colorado, David Weaver, a former Douglas County sheriff in line to become the state's next U.S. Marshal. The backup could get even longer as President Donald Trump nominates additional candidates. Quote, "Senator Gardner does a real disservice to the nation as a whole, and we urgently ask him to reconsider his rash and ill-advised obstructionism," said Chuck Canterbury, president of the National Fraternal Order of Police. Quote, "Policy differences should be worked out by dialogue and not turn into hostage situations. At the root of the fight is a decision last month by Sessions to rescind an Obama era." So this is just more fallout from that. Like I said, that's what I was talking about then. This is a big piece of the Sessions fallout video as well. So while the change hasn't led to federal raids on pot dispensaries and business largely has continued as usual, the move still sent shockwaves through the fledgling cannabis industry. Garner wasn't able to convince Sessions to reconsider when the two Republicans met last month, though aides to the Colorado lawmaker said the two sides haven't given up on negotiations. So it could be another month or so, at least, before this thing's resolved. It could be more than a month. Quote, "He opposed the legalization of marijuana in 2012, but it's not going to sit back. He's not going to sit back and let Colorado's rights be trampled on by the federal government," Contreras said. And that's the Garner spokesman, by the way, as we read up there. And then over here we have Grassley again. Quote, "I can understand why he did it." Grassley, who nonetheless disagreed with Garner's arguments for states' rights. Grassley says, "I am an advocate for federal law under the supremacy clause of the Constitution, that the federal law overrides state law. I hate the supremacy clause because I think it can be interpreted that states still have rights. If not, then why do we even have states? And why don't we just run it like one big country instead of a bunch of states?" And I pulled it again. I pull this article out every once in a while. I don't know, I'm kind of old, so I remember back in the day, there was this dude on MSNBC named Ed Schultz. You might have heard of him. But he used to have this thing called the vulture chart, and it showed like the difference between production versus wages. And wages just always like stayed the same, and production just like just at one point it was kind of, a reasonable amount above wages, and then it just boom. So he pulled that chart out all the time just to illustrate points that the Republicans don't give a shit about the people, I guess. I don't know. And then this one comes up all the time, and I just wanted to mention it one more time. But when I do, like, I don't really put it in good enough context. So this is between 2006 and 2016. This is a 10-year period, 21 million opioids. So really, that's like 2 million per year, and you got 2,900 residents. Seems like a lot of pills to be sitting around waiting for somebody to consume them. I mean, they ain't gonna just sit there forever until, they gotta go. There's expiration dates on these things. That's, it's kind of what it is, man. This problem is there's so many people focusing on, well, what's causing this problem? I don't know. One of the main things that cause the problem is the fact that they can produce as many of these pills as they want, and you got like more manufacturers now than ever before, and each one of these manufacturers has like 4 or 5 different kind of opioids that they make. A little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Purdue stops promoting opioids to doctors. Cut in half of the sales staff. Doesn't sound like enough. And all the way, like I just said, man, you got more manufacturers than ever just cranking out the pills. So it's not even really, I don't know how much this is really going to do anything. It's not going to put a dent in shit. And really, this seems to me like these guys, they got in, they made their billions, they got on the Forbes fucking top 20 list or whatever of billionaires on the fucking planet. And then they started, the lawsuits started pouring in. And they decided, you know, well, it's time to get out while the lawsuits are just now coming in. All right. So I guess I pretty much summed it up. If you want some actual numbers, the OxyContin pill, a time-release version of oxycodone, was hailed as a breakthrough treatment for chronic pain when it was approved in the late 1995. Problem is users were quickly discovering they could get a heroin-like high by crushing the pills and snorting or injecting the entire dose at once. And in 2010, they reformulated it to make it harder to crush and stop selling the original form of the drug. Still, people did it. Purdue eventually acknowledged that its promotions exaggerated the drug's safety and minimized the risks of addiction. After a federal investigation, the company and 3 executives pled guilty in 2007 and agreed to pay more than $600 million for misleading the public about the risks of OxyContin. But the drug continued to rack up blockbuster sales. And like I said, they continued to manufacture way more of it than anybody actually ordered. And, you know, that shit eventually makes it to the street. Basically, yeah, it's just like what I said, man. They got in, they made their billions, and they got out. On the way out, they're getting hit with lawsuits left and right. In 2007, they paid more than $600 million just for misleading the public. You know, and you got, what's this guy saying? There's literally hundreds, if not thousands of lawsuits coming in right now for Purdue, for OxyContin. We're talking local area, you know, townships and cities, all the way up to big cities, all the way up to counties suing them, all the way up to whole states suing them. So they're on the run. Will they weather the storm? Probably. I mean, we're talking about people that made like upwards of $20 billion off these off of just these pills. Well, maybe that was their overall worth. And I think it was something like 16 billion. But remember, each one of those billions is 1,000 million. So you're gonna have to chip away at that really hard to bring them down to zero. And not only that, but they're still making a lot of pills. I mean, Purdue they didn't fold up their whole operation. They only cut half the sales staff. So they're still pushing some kind of shit out the door. Well, when will we ever be able to hear good news about this gun situation? Because by my measure, there's a lot of people with guns out there that smoke weed. And it's only going to get more like that. Because medical marijuana, old people, a lot of these old people have guns. Some of them have like 50, 100, 200 guns. You're going to tell these fuckers it's either the gun or the weed? No, you're not. So the former NRA president says let medical marijuana patients have guns. Why can't a current member or president, like a high-ranking board member, yo, what the fuck are we waiting for on this? Why can't the NRA actually just at least make a statement besides mimicking the statement of the federal government, the ATF statement? Because that's basically all they did last time. They're like, oh yeah, the ATF statement, yeah, that checks out. We're good. No, we're not good. That's your fucking job is to protect the people. That's the actual people on the ground. That's all you guys talk about is, everybody should be able to have a gun. Well, why? What the fuck's different about somebody because they're on medical marijuana? Absolutely ridiculous. One wrinkle often lost when debating the rights of medical marijuana patients is gun ownership. And that part, it's because these two issues might seem on the opposite sides of the aisle. I don't think so, man. I personally, I'm not a big gun person, but I think it's pretty much bullshit. Someone trying to tell me to fucking make a choice between whether or not I can protect my home and my property with a gun, or whether I can't because I have medical marijuana. It fucking don't even make sense, man. Come on. But if you trust the word of a former NRA president, that might not be as true as you think. David Keene wrote in the Washington Times Wednesday, the federal government's Schedule I drug classification for marijuana causes significant problems for gun owners. Though medical marijuana is legalized in 30 states, registering for a medical marijuana card prohibits that person from owning firearms. And this is what he wrote, or what was in the Times. Schedule I classification, I just read that. Firearms and explosive defines anyone with a medical marijuana prescription as an admitted drug user prohibited by definition from owning, possessing, or using a firearm. In some states, federal law enforcement officers have threatened to go after either gun owners with prescription or firearms dealers or private sellers who dare to sell them guns. Keene cited, and you always hear about the grandfathering, like, there's no grandfathering on this issue. If you had guns before, you heard rumors about them talking about this shit, it doesn't matter. You're sitting target, you're a sitting duck with the guns, and you're a sitting duck without them. Can't even have ammo. Keene cited incidences where those with medical marijuana cards ran into trouble. One card-carrying Nevada woman attempted to buy a firearm from a Carson City retailer back in 2011, but the ATF had recently put out a notice that licensed dealers may not transfer firearms or ammunition to individuals with medical marijuana prescriptions. I wish they'd stop using that word prescriptions. The fresh toast. Keep pulling articles from these guys. I guess they're the fresh new thing in cannabis. Cannabis, RX, culture, celebrity, and food and drink. Cheers to the fresh toast. And then we all remember the Honolulu police contacted every local registered gun owner and told them that they had to surrender their guns. And then we heard the Pennsylvania one where the people are talking about no guns for you weed people, and it's just like, oh, in Connecticut, oh, we want to make a designation on your license that says you're a medical marijuana person, so that if, when you go to buy a gun, we can just see that and be like, nope, sorry, you can't buy a gun, dipshit. I mean, come the fuck on. You guys act like people that smoke weed are either really stupid or we're little babies. That's fucking ignorant, man. You think someone's going to actually go try to buy a gun if it's illegal and they got a marijuana stamp on their license? I mean, should we just wear a scarlet letter on our forehead, fucker? Whatever, man. But meanwhile in Pennsylvania, though, the governor there was basically like, the police won't be taking away the guns of those with medical marijuana cards in Pennsylvania as much as he can help it. And he said people should not have to make that choice. Duh. Trading, and Keene echoed the sentiment, stating that trading a constitutional right for pain relief is a choice no one should have to make. Well, I'm growing my own medical marijuana at the risk that they could kick a fucking door in any time. Just because it's legal for me to do so with a card and shit doesn't mean they still can't just kick the door in and be like, well, see you in court. So it seems like I'm always living on the edge of losing all my rights just because of my medicine. And that's just, I've been getting used to that my whole life. So one more thing, you know, just not being able to have a gun. It's kind of ridiculous. And Cory Booker's bill, speaking of the devil that I mentioned earlier on that Bernie thing, we have a new sponsor, Senator Markey. And let's see, is this the, let's go right to the bill. Of course. Yeah, that's some pretty stringy ass bud. And I don't know, don't look like that's gonna finish outdoors. Maybe, I don't know. Depends on where that's at. So he's got 10 sponsors so far. Let's look at the list. We have Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts. Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, Massachusetts. Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland. Mazi Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii. Tom Udall, Democrat from New Mexico. Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Arkansas. Al Franken, Democrat from Minnesota. Mike Lee, Republican from Utah. Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York. And Paul Ryan, Republican from Kentucky. So that's about as bipartisan as marijuana bills ever get. But remember, oh, this is the Careers Act. Never mind. I thought this was the... That's fine, though. You know, it's not as cool as if it was the Marijuana Justice Act. But the Careers Act should just be passed. All right, maybe I'll do a clip about that one of these days. Illinois. All right, so we're back. We're down to state laws or state news, and we got the Illinois Department of Public Health. This is an update on a story I've been following, and they did appeal the decision to add severe pain as a qualifying condition for medical marijuana, and that is just fucking sad. Well, I don't, you know. Obviously, corruption is why. There's no other way around it. Again, they want to ban kratom. They want to make it so so you can get a fucking felony charge for kratom. Schedule 1 it. Put it up there with heroin. We all know that kratom is not at all the dangerous thing that heroin is. All right, Schedule 1 is just a fucking. It's ridiculous. LSD's on Schedule 1. Does anyone out there think that LSD is addictive? Is LSD medicinal? They're finding out that it is. And in fact, it was used, you know, the guy that invented this shit basically wrote a book about the medicinal properties of it. So, you know, you can debate that if you want. This is ridiculous. The appeal comes weeks after the Cook County judge ordered a health department to add intractable pain or severe and constant pain with no cure in the state's list of more than 40 qualifying medical conditions. The ruling stems from a lawsuit filed by Ann Mednick of Rolling Meadows. 58-year-old petitioned the agency to add the condition, saying medical marijuana would have fewer side effects to treat pain for sacroiliac joint dysfunction and osteoarthritis that the opioids she'd been prescribed. Fewer side effects. That's all she was asking for. She was like, you know, I don't want all these side effects and addiction and, you know, and these opioids don't even work half the time. I'm just chasing the fucking monkey around my back. But no, apparently they don't care about that. So the public health director, Nirav Shah, denied Mednick's request last year, saying that there was a lack of high-quality data from clinical trials to add the condition to the list. But a Cook County Circuit Judge, Mitchell, called Nirav's reasoning clearly erroneous, citing medical journals that reviewed 45 clinical studies looking at medical marijuana's effect on treating chronic pain. Health Department spokeswoman Melanie Arnold declined comment, citing pending litigation. Shah's office has been a reliable opponent to expanding the medical marijuana condition list in the past several years. And I think another one that was on there was that they denied before was autism. If I'm not mistaken. Some kind of a chronic fatigue thing, and I do believe that they do have certain things that would be considered debilitating pain in and of themselves, but they're individualized, and it's like, and I believe one of those was some kind of arthritis, but it wasn't osteoarthritis. It was like rheumatoid arthritis. So it's like, are you kidding? And some doctor might even misdiagnose this. If you really bumped your head, you might say this joint dysfunction mixed with osteoarthritis could be rheumatoid arthritis. You never know. Maybe a creative doctor could write that script for you. But, you know, this is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, there's just absolutely no excuse for this shit. But it is Illinois. Their medical marijuana program is overall pretty sad. So I don't know what to say. The only thing I can hope for is that they legalize marijuana. They keep talking about it. Just go ahead and do it. The talking about it shit. Now there's other states that I pulled the articles and then I looked at them and I just shook my head. It's fucking deja vu from last year. This is 2017, February, all over again. You got your legislative sessions that could be working on legislation to legalize marijuana and tax and regulate it. Instead, what they're doing is let's explore it. Let's talk about it. Let's look into other things and do this and that. And that's cool. You can say that, but all you're really saying is that you're not legalizing marijuana in 2018. And we got Connecticut, Maryland. There's a couple others. New Jersey's almost fallen into that list, in my opinion. So we're gonna hear some more. Here's my prediction. You'll hear some more squawking back and forth about it. Somebody will come up with a really good excuse as to why not to do it, especially Illinois. I think that already hit the floor. And then that's a done deal. I mean, these legislative sessions end fast. Like, before you even know it, session's over. Huh? So, New Mexico lawmakers are eyeing marijuana in fight against opioids. And this is another situation where I think they just want to get this put on the list of qualifying conditions. Add opioid addiction to the list. Not even pain, just straight up, you know what? I'm addicted to opioids and I want to get off. So put it on the list, guys. So the supporters gathered on Monday in Santa Fe with representatives of the Drug Policy Alliance to build support for expanding access to medical marijuana. Quote, thousands of our neighbors and relatives are suffering, and so are families and communities. The time to act is now, said Senator Jeff Steinborn of La Cruz, one of the Democrats supporting the initiative. An advisory panel has twice considered petitions calling for medical marijuana to be added as a tool in the fight against opioid abuse, most recently in November. The state health department said Monday that Secretary Lynn Gallagher is awaiting a report from a panel before making a decision. Uh-oh. That's ridiculous. New Mexico's medical marijuana program was started a decade ago, and the number of licensed patients is now nearly 48,000. In Santa Fe County, the number of medical marijuana card holders has jumped nearly 43% from January 2017 to January 18th. There are now 7 dispensaries in the county with 2 more on the way. Patients must meet at least one of 21 qualifying conditions for their medical marijuana card. Those include severe chronic pain, post-traumatic stress disorder, cancer, and MS. Health Department spokesman Paul Rain said the state is taking a comprehensive approach to fighting opioid abuse and overdose deaths. He pointed to existing efforts to track and avoid overprescribing and make overdose reversing drugs like naloxone more accessible. Gallagher rejected the advisory panel's previous recommendation to add opioid addiction as a qualifying condition last June. Not looking good. Supporters of the legislation argue that medical marijuana can help with opioid withdrawal symptoms. Quote, there is more evidence from clinical and patient data that is continuing to mount. We know that it is an effective harm reduction measure, so we're just trying to show the Secretary that there are not a lot of New Mexicans out here that believe in this, said Jessica Gale with the Drug Policy Alliance. There are a lot of New Mexicans out here that believe in this. No reason to wag your tail, Mal. So, 2 states trying to Illinois was more or less the same thing, like, hey, opioids, no, cannabis, yes. One for pain and one just, hey, I need to get off these opioids. They already have pain on their list here, so if you wanted to not start doing opioids in the first place in New Mexico, you're probably all right. Now, this is, like I said, man, if they're going to turn this down again, it just furthers the dialogue and the narrative that, hey, guess what? Opioids are your only way that they want you to go. It's like they're bottlenecking you in. They're just tunneling you right into the opioid bottle. I can't think of a better way to put it. Like, they don't want you to do kratom. They don't want you to have medical marijuana for pain or for opioid withdrawals. They want you on their shit. They want you on doses of their shit, scheduled at a certain time. I mean, that's their dream come true. Oh, this guy has to take like a Suboxone every day at 1 in the afternoon. Bingo. I mean, can you see why they don't want medical marijuana to include opioid addiction or chronic pain? Yeah, it's pretty easy, ain't it? It's got nothing to do with the safety of, marijuana and the FDA's bullshit that they've been saying about it for however long they've been saying whatever they're saying, and I don't even know what they say anymore. What do you have to say about that, Scott Gottlieb from the FDA? Is marijuana medicine? You guys approved THC for munchie medicine, from incest. The people that kill people with fucking incest, with what do you call it? Fentanyl mouth spray or whatever that shit is. You guys are crazy, man. Just absolutely ridiculous. So Maine just took a big first step for the country. Maine becomes the first state to protect marijuana use outside of work. Beginning today, on February 1st, employers in Maine are prohibited from discriminating against employees based on their marijuana or marijuana byproduct use outside of work. So take the marijuana off the piss test list. Maine's Labor Department also removed the drug from the list of substances for which employers may test applicants. So the actual state leads the way by saying, hey, you can't work for the state of Maine as a state employee. We're not going to piss test you for marijuana if you want to work for us. And we can't. because it's against the law now. So the law prohibits employers from disciplining or refusing to hire workers aged 21 or older based on their off-state marijuana use. It's amazing that Maine has such awesome policies, you know, when they don't even have regulations to sell weed at a store yet because the governor fucking absolutely hates weed. And now the governor has to hire people that smoke weed. That's fucking awesome. It makes me want to go get a job at the governor's mansion or whatever, at the office, whatever the fuck. Employees are still free to employers, I keep confusing the two, are still free to prohibit its use and possession in the workplace and can discipline employees who are under the influence of marijuana in the workplace. According to Littler, a spokesperson for the state labor department says that a positive test won't be enough to prove that an employee was under the influence. Littler says Maine's law office doesn't affect compliance with federally mandated drug testing for marijuana, like that required by U.S. Department of Transportation regulations. So if you want to get a federal job in Maine, you still got to take that federal piss test. But, man, thank you, Maine, for coming out ahead of the pack on something that I've been like screaming about my whole life. Michigan's one of those places where anybody can discriminate against someone with a marijuana in their piss, especially employers. They do it the most. And yeah, good job, Maine. Colorado has a city where marijuana has overtaken the sales of alcohol. Whoops. Yeah, see that, alcohol? No one cares about you no more. Sales of marijuana have overtaken alcohol in the city in Colorado 3 years after the state became the first in the U.S. to legalize recreational use of the drug. Licensed vendors in the ski resort of Aspen raked in $11.3 million income from cannabis last year. I was just making sure this was this year. Compared to $10.5 million brought in off licenses. So we're talking about, $800,000 weed beat you by or whatever. It is believed to be the first time legal marijuana sales have eclipsed those of alcohol anywhere in the U.S. Aspen's first cannabis shop opened in March of 2014, 3 months after legislation for taxing and regulating sales came into force across Colorado. By the next year, the resort, which had a population of less than 7,000, has 7 licensed distributors. Aspen's cannabis sales grew 16% last year compared to 2016, when shops brought in $9.7 million from the drug, and the city's finance department said. The marijuana industry is the fastest growing of Aspen's 12 retail sectors, according to figure in an end-of-year sales tax report. Max Meredith, who runs one of the city's marijuana shops, said the growth in sales shows adults are open to change. He added there are new substitutes, and they can be handled responsibly. And perhaps there are a few less bar fights at night, or, late night fights. A study by the Georgia State University last year found that alcohol sales had tumbled 15% in U.S. states where medical marijuana had been legalized. Counties where cannabis could be legally obtained had 20% lower alcohol sales than neighboring counties across state borders where it was still outlawed. So that's pretty cool. Now we have one more story. And this is Detroit. They had a situation where people were getting caught in the middle between the the local law for dispensaries and them being in limbo between now and when licenses are granted for the new dispensary licenses. I haven't really been following this story much, but apparently it has something to do with the 2016 ballot initiative and whether or not that ballot initiative is going to... Let's just read it. Detroit is beginning to accept applications for medical marijuana business licenses under an order of the Michigan Court of Appeals, but the city is not guaranteeing it will finish processing any requests this week despite a looming state deadline. A 3-judge panel on Friday issued an emergency order directing Detroit to accept applications as dispensary owners rush to meet Thursday's state deadline. Existing businesses that do not turn in an application and local approval form by then could be closed and denied the chance at licensure under the new state law. That sucks, and a lot of these people are really like heavily invested in this process already. Attorneys representing several of those dispensaries are now asking the Michigan Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation for an extension as they seek approval from the city, which had halted implementation of the new voter-approved ordinances because of a lawsuit challenging their constitutionality. And there you go. So, of course, when the law passed, someone's like, oh, we don't... Is that constitutional? Man, it was a fucking 74% or some shit was the vote for yes on this new ordinance that would basically let dispensaries be in a lot more places than it did before, and it would let Detroit opt into the state licensing system. Quote, the stakes are as high as they can get, said Michael D. Stein, a Bloomfield Hills attorney who represents more than a dozen dispensaries in Detroit that feared forced closure if they missed the state deadline. State deadline is, well, now it's Thursday now, so... Or wait, today's Wednesday, sorry. But anyway, this will be tomorrow, so, you know, we'll see what happens. Basically, they put us in a disaster situation because we timely filed our lawsuit to get Detroit to accept the applications in a timely manner pursuant to this new law. The Court of Appeals decision vindicated our legal position that the city of Detroit must accept applications. Despite the state deadline, Stein said he is concerned Detroit will not process applications by Thursday or provide businesses with an attestation confirming the local community allows dispensaries as required under a 2016 law. Lawrence Garcia, the city's new corporation counsel, said Detroit will comply with the Court of Appeals ruling to begin accepting applications, but declined to estimate how long processing could take. The court dismissed a request to dictate specifics of how the city should review applications. The form is available and can be submitted, and the city is accepting it, Garcia told the Detroit News. But I hope these folks can be sympathetic to the city's need to process the application in a way that is fair and consistent and doesn't really fall prey to what may be a temporary change in the state of the law by virtue of the way our legal system works. Okay. Whatever. Anyway, new ordinances approved by Detroit voters in November effectively repealed existing medical marijuana facility rules and prompted a lawsuit from a business group challenging their constitutionality. Haters, in other words. Garcia said a Friday hearing before Wayne County Circuit Court Judge Robert Colombo Jr. could be pretty momentous and clarify the impact of the voter initiatives. We're trying to do the right thing, he said. We're not trying to skirt the law. We're trying to do the right thing, but this is a very confusing time, and we want to do things in the most logical fashion so that we get just and equitable outcomes for everybody. I don't like the sound of that. It sounded really wishy-washy. At least 63 cities, townships, and villages in 35 Michigan counties have adopted ordinances allowing local businesses to qualify for the new state licenses, according to the state, which is not counting Detroit since its new rules were suspended after the lawsuit was filed on January 1st. Spokesman David Harns said Monday that the Michigan Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation will not extend its Thursday deadline for applicants operating with local approval, a requirement that is designed to bring existing businesses into compliance after they had been operating without direct state oversight. Ugh, that's kind of shitty. But all hope is not lost for Detroit businesses. Quote, in situations where it is applicable, the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation will accept relevant court orders in lieu of this attestation, Harns told the News. Charles Ramey, Deputy Corporation Counsel for Detroit, had issued a January 5th memo telling city officials not to accept, process, or approve any applications for a permit to license any medical marijuana facility until further notice. Quote, it would be improper, administratively wasteful, and confusing to the public to implement the initiative or take any action pertaining to permitting or licensing of marijuana facilities while the litigation is pending. Bullshit. I think this guy's probably, one of the people that the corruptors are paying to talk, obviously. But there is no injunction to prohibit the enforcement of the ordinance, and no court has declared it unconstitutional, Court of Appeals Judge Thomas Cameron said in the Friday order directing the city to begin accepting applications. There is a presumption that ordinances are constitutional, he wrote. And, of course, if you look at them, your brain says immediately, yeah, there's nothing unconstitutional about these fucking ordinances, you dipshit. It's so common sense. But I do believe that Charles Ramey, yeah, buddy, I think you're corrupt, because obviously you are stonewalling, and it's shady. It's shady as all fuck. I want to know who these people are that put you up to this. Who do you work for? 5 other Metro Detroit communities have adopted ordinances opting into the new state licensure law, according to the Bureau. Inkster and River Rouge in Wayne County, Hazel Park and Orion Charter Township in Oakland County, and Lenox Township in Macomb County will allow licensed facilities within their boundaries. Michigan voters approved medical marijuana in 2008, but the law did not authorize dispensaries, which had operated for years in many parts of the states without legal blessing of the state or the federal government. Governor Rick Snyder signed the new licensing law in September of 2016. The state had initially contemplated closing down existing dispensaries, but announced in November that owners could apply for new licenses with local approval. Businesses that continue to operate without local approval past Thursday must close under emergency state rules issued in December. Ouch. So Thursday's D-Day. We're going to see what happens around the area, all right? Noncompliance is grounds for disciplinary action and referral to law enforcement for unlicensed activity, according to a Friday memo from the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. And that's all I got on the Michigan story. That's all I got on all of it, guys. I did have a video to watch, but I watched it, and quite frankly, I didn't really find anything in it that I could comment on too much, except for the demeanor of the way people in mainstream media talk about these stories, all right? And the hidden way that sometimes in the news, the people on the screen, the news people and the guests, and they have like little codes and ways that they act like, cute about marijuana consumption or whatever. And it just makes you think, like, why does it have to be like this? Why are they acting like they're hiding something from their parents? Because that's what it is. This giant nanny state fucking apparatus known as the drug war. It's designed so that they can tell you what you can and cannot put in your body. And, we've never seen more blatantly them putting their foot down and saying, no, we are the fucking authority that tells you what you can and cannot use. We tell you what you can and cannot use for your pain. We tell you what you can and cannot use for your addiction. Oh, the things that you want to use are natural, and you can't cut them into individual little doses and synthetically make a fucking perfect little pill that does the same exact thing every time of it. It's not highly addictive or cause death. Oh, well, we gotta ban it. You can't fucking do that. Oh, you can grow it in your backyard? No way. There's no fucking way we're gonna let you do that shit. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people are dying of opioids, but that's what we want you to take. We want you on opioids. We want your friends on opioids. We want your parents on opioids. We want your daughters on opioids, your sons, your cousins, your nephews, your best friends, your worst enemies. We want all of those people on opioids. And you got these right-wingers in the fucking comment sections. I can't say this enough. I'm really sick of this shit. Alright, we're out here fighting for tooth and nail for people to be able to use medical marijuana at school, when all it is some kind of little oil that you rub on your wrist and a patch on your foot. We got people fighting tooth and nail for that privilege. Meanwhile, in the comments section of videos about that, you have people talking shit, acting all like, oh, fuck you, you stoners. We don't want people coming into school smelling like weed. Might be offensive to the other students or some shit. It's just something completely ridiculous. Makes no sense. And it's like, what's the plank to be a right-winger? You're highly religious? Well, it's all natural. I'm not one of these God people that goes around and God did this and God made that. God works in mysterious ways, or whatever the fuck they say about God, because I don't even believe in God. But what I do is I notice how they always use God to justify every fucking thing they do that I don't like. Quite frankly, they act like they can use God to discriminate against people. But really, they don't even look at the fact that, if you do believe in God and you do look at the Bible, it really fucking plainly says right in it that you can use marijuana. And there's nothing in there that says you can't. So what the fuck? Why is the God people against it? And then I guess I really don't know why right-wingers are so against marijuana and so loving of authoritative, totalitarian rule. Nanny state bullshit. So right-wingers aren't supposed to be that. They're supposed to be like the rebels. They're supposed to be like, they don't like the government. Taxes, theft, and all that shit. Freedom, liberty. That's what I hear. That's all I hear from the right-wingers is those refrains. All of a sudden, though, they're totally okay with the fucking prison industrial complex built around just marijuana. Okay. Whatever, man. So that's it for the weekly podcast. Enjoyed it? Then go ahead and subscribe. Try to keep on doing these, man. I mean, it doesn't seem like these stories are ever going to stop. That's all I got.